This is the third time I'm filming this. Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's a beautiful, super sunny, hot Eastern North Carolina day here. And when I filmed this the first time in the morning, it was, I think, possibly hotter than it is now, if that's possible. Doing this again in the afternoon, and it's still hot, but let's move on. The title of the video is, what does it take to build a garden? And that's a good question. And it's a question that is subjective to this type of garden that you're building. If you're building a, I'll use different examples. So an example number one, if you're building a 24-inch, let's say a 24-inch pot. You can take a 24-inch pot, you can pack it all sorts of full of whatever you want, okay, and then that's your garden. Let's say you put it on your balcony. If you live in the city or you're in a small town or something, that's your garden, okay. If that's your garden, that's your garden. That's a micro garden. Good on you. And that's one level of garden. Then let's take it to the next level. Let's say my old house in Sayville, Long Island, where I had approximately 40 by 60, my front yard. So let's say anybody's front yard that's approximately that size. Okay, that's another level. Then the next example I'll use, if you catch some wind noise, I do apologize. So the next example that I'm going to use is this garden. So this is 1.5 acres, and I'm building it out. And then the next level up, I'll use two, actually going to be Monty Don, the English gardener and television host or whatever. His garden, which is 2 acres, and then Laura from Garden Answer, she's here on YouTube. If I remember, I'll put links below. And her garden is approximately 5 acres. Then let's kick it up to the top level, okay, and let's say Versailles in Paris, okay? I believe it's Paris. Anywho, that's that's hundreds of acres, okay? That's hundreds of acres. So there's different levels and different types of gardens, and when I say what does it take to build a garden, the same, I think, and again, I'm a novice, I'm a newbie, I've only been gardening like 4 years. If you have any suggestions or thoughts or comments, please leave them below. So if you're going to build a garden, okay, and what does it take to build a garden? If you're building that 24-inch pot, it doesn't take much. Now, I don't want to poo-poo on anybody's parade who's made a little garden in 24-inch pot or 36-inch pot, whatever it is, a balcony garden. I don't want to poo-poo on them because they have put effort and energy and resources into it. But when you compare it to somebody's garden in the front yard in suburbia, or this garden on 1.5 acres, or Monty or Laura's gardens, which are acres, or Versailles, which is hundreds of acres, again, it's all subjective. But the same things, I think, hold true across all of them. And the first thing maybe I'm going to try to touch on is design. If you decide I'm going to have a garden, I'm going to make a garden, I'm going to build a garden. And then again, if you're going to build, if the only space you have, if the only size garden you want or you can have is, let's say, a 24-inch pot, that's great. So then the next thing you need to do is decide what you're going to put into that, obviously, and then how you're going to arrange it, and then materials, plants, put it together. There's your garden. If you're building out your front yard, if you're making a larger garden, then again, the whole thing is, how am I going to lay it out? What plants am I going to need? How many plants am I going to need? Do I need to improve the soil? So the level in which it increases in designing that garden now takes a step up from the, let's say again, the pot. So it takes a step up. Then, I really hope you're not picking up any of this wind noise because it's quite breezy, which feels nice. It's not as hot as it was, but you may be picking up some of that noise in the microphone. I apologize. So now let's take it up to Monty and Laura's size garden, and where they got acres. Those gardens take considerable amount of thought in designing them and building them out, etc. And then again, Versailles, you know, you have architects. You have architects who sit there and draw the stuff out as if they were building a building, and they decide how everything's going to get laid out, and then eventually what's going to get planted, where it's going to get planted, etc. So there's your size of your garden, and then the degrees of difficulty, as it were, of building out that garden. When now design, again, if you're doing a 24-inch pot, let's just touch on design real quick. If you're doing a 24-inch pot, then you're thinking, okay, what plants do I want? Do I have a sunny balcony, etc., shady, etc.? So, and then you put your plants in the pot, and then that's your design. And then again, because of the limited space you have, your design isn't going to be over the top. It's not going to be, you're not thinking too much about the overall scope of the thing, because again, it's only 24-inch pot, or again, a small balcony garden. You're looking at obviously things like the sun or the shade, and then you're planning it out from there, as much as you would with a larger garden. So again, my Sayville garden in New York there, so that one is my front yard, and I planted it out in the front yard because it was north facing. The front of my house was north facing, and the front yard got the most sun. So I decided, okay, this is the garden. I'm going to have a sun garden. It's going to be filled with all sorts of plants that love sun. They'll grow well in the sun, and then I can build it out from there. Monty and Laura, again, they're on acres, and again, it's how are we going to arrange or design the garden in such an aspect that it's useful, it's beautiful, and it's functional. And then again, Versailles, what does the king want? It's because that's when it was built, back when they were French kings, and it had to be grand, it had to be audacious, it had to speak volumes, it had to say, I have a lot of money, I'm very powerful, this is my garden. So because different times, that's how it rolled there. And building the garden takes, whether you're doing a 24-inch pot or you're doing Versailles, it takes effort, obviously, and it takes a passion. And again, if you're doing a 24-inch pot, you're limited as to your size, but you're not limited in your passion. You can be very passionate about that. And as you ramp up, obviously, with size, I think the passion for gardening more or less stays the same, but the dedication that you have to put forward, or the effort that you have to put forward, is a lot greater. So again, going from a 40 by 60 roughly front garden in New York to then an acre and a half that I have, and then I look at Laura or Monty and the acres that they have, and then again, you just keep scaling up from there. So it takes a lot to build a garden, as I was saying, and one of the things that, as you're building out that garden, that you want to do, or you have to do, is maintenance. And again, this is something that people maybe, if you're not a gardener, maybe you're not thinking about this, or if you are a gardener, maybe it is something that you think about it a lot. And by that I mean, so I'm building out this garden on an acre and a half, and I started off with my veg garden, and I'm going to build a rose garden next to it, and there's going to be an orchard off in the distance, and in front of the vegetable garden here, there's going to be a flower garden. But as I'm building these things out, as I'm putting in the fencing or the shrubbery, or I'm laying or edging, or whatever it is that I'm doing to build out the structure of the garden itself, I have to maintain the property or the ground that I have. So I have to mow the lawn, I have to do the weeding, I have to do these things to maintain. And it's not just me. If you watch Garden Answer, Laura over at Garden Answer, she's doing the same thing. She's going out, she's weeding. She actually, I think in a video a while back, she said that she has a Monday through Friday sort of schedule that she then goes through, and she'll turn around and say, okay, on this day we're weeding this little area, on this day we're weeding this area, on this day. So, and she has somebody who helps her, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But she goes around and does all the weeding of those various items. They have to mow the lawn. The lawn needs to be mowed. Monty Don was building out his garden. It was a flat field, and it didn't spring up into Long Meadow, which is the name of his garden, overnight. It was a gradual thing as he planted his plants and he built his vegetable garden and his greenhouses. He still had to mow the lawn. He still had to trim the hedges as they were growing. There were things that have to be done. So maintenance is something that I think, again, it's just something that when you say, you know, what does it take to build a garden? It's sort of overlooked, but it's something that it's key, it's critical, because no one wants a shabby looking garden that's just an absolute mess. So labor is something that we're going to go back to that 24-inch pot garden. If you're building that 24-inch pot garden, you can more likely do it all by yourself in an afternoon or morning or whenever, and you'll put it together and you'll maintain it. So you'll maybe pluck out a weed if a weed seed gets in there and starts to grow, or you'll trim something or deadhead a flower if it needs to be deadheaded. These, you know, that's your little garden. The labor that went into that is yours and yours alone. Unless you had some help from family and friends, that's fine. But again, generally it's one person could put together that. If you step up to a suburban garden, again, my property in Sayville, I was able to build and maintain that myself. Part of the reason was because of the size. It wasn't too large, and I didn't have everything. So the whole area that I was using for garden wasn't all planted out. I essentially had borders running around the edges, and I had a lot of lawn in the middle. So it was relatively simple to maintain, as it were. By the end of that, there was a rhythm. There was a rhythm that I knew what plants were going to come up where, and you know how things were going to work, and everything was sort of taken care of by the third year, that I knew I didn't have to do anything extraneous, i.e. put in structure of some sort, fencing or you know, I don't know, new shrubbery or something. But again, now here on 1.5 acres, I'm starting off with a blank slate, and I'm doing this all by myself, and so far so good. I am not only maintaining but also building. And so I don't have any help here on 1.5 acres. Not that I wouldn't like help, but for the time being, as it stands, I'm able to not only maintain what I have, but also continue to grow. Now, when you get up to Laura's 5 acres or Monty Don's 2 acres, now when you're talking acres, both Monty Don and Laura have help. Now, Monty Don, I believe, has 1 to 2 people helping him on a regular basis. So he does not maintain his garden all by himself. He actually has people come in and help him, and that's for a variety of reasons. He may have somebody come in to do some hedge trimming while that's happening, he's then working in the veg garden, or he's working in another garden, or he's off because he's a TV host filming something someplace else, but he has that help. Laura of Garden Answer, she has her husband, and they have a full-time gardener, Paul. I believe he's full-time, maybe he's part-time. Either way, Paul is there to help out Laura, and again, her husband's there to help her out because she has 5 acres of land. They started off with 2.5, something like that, and then I know they just purchased an additional 3. If you haven't watched Garden Answer, go watch that. She's very informative, and it's very interesting and exciting to see the new property that they purchased right next to their existing property develop and grow. So if you like watching gardens be developed, perfect thing. So she has help in the garden, which is great. And then if you go over to, again, the top level, let's say Versailles, in Paris, France, they probably have hundreds of workers that help maintain that garden all the time because it is so large. It's hundreds of acres, and there's thousands upon thousands of hedges and trees that need to be trimmed and cut, and flowers that need to be deadheaded, and new plants that need to be planted out, etc., etc., etc. You kind of get the gist. But with all of that, there's a cost. And again, we'll start off with the 24-inch pot. If you're building a garden in a 24-inch pot, you have a minimal investment. Let's say I'm going to ballpark $50. You have to buy the pot, the soil that's going to go into the pot, and the plants that are going to go into the pot. So again, let's ballpark $50. That's your investment. That's the cost of that garden. Now every year, beyond that initial purchase, maybe you purchase a new plant, or maybe you just add mulch or compost, maybe some fertilizer, so the cost sort of decreases. Your garden itself is built, it's done. And at that point, it's just evolving or growing, and then again, the costs are minimal. When I was building out my garden in Sayville, the costs there, I estimate around, I don't know, let's say a couple of $1,000, because I turned around, I purchased some new tools, so there's an add-on there. I had to purchase the ground itself, maybe 2 to 3 inches of topsoil, and then the rest is sand. So I had to purchase a lot of cow manure and compost to mix into the ground. And then of course I purchased, probably, I don't know, maybe 100 plants, give or take. So again, all those are costs. Now by the third year of that garden, I was purchasing less plants because I had many of the plants and they were perennials, so they came back year after year. There was less plants to purchase, there was less mulch to purchase, there was less compost to purchase because the garden was built and established. But there was that initial outlay. Now here in North Carolina, I have 1.5 acres of virtually, well, not virtually, I have 1.5 acres of nothing. I'm now building this all out, and I have to, and there's a lot of cost to this. There's literally thousands of it's my guesstimate right now is probably just under $10,000, and that's a lot of dirt, some tools, plants, because I've been planting stuff out. I started purchasing plants back in December of last year, knowing that I was going to be building out this garden. I had to buy raised beds. But now that I've purchased those raised beds and on a lot of those plants, I'm not going to have to purchase them again. That initial outlay is done. But again, I'm building out a large garden on 1.5 acres. The rose garden is going to, I just actually made a purchase for the rose garden of some very good compost. That's just another cha-ching. I have my 5 initial roses that I'm going to put in there, but down the road there'll be more roses going into the rose garden. Hence the reason it's called the rose garden. So, and it's a large garden. It's about 60 feet deep by 60 feet wide approximately. So there'll be a lot of roses going in this. That's over time. There will be those continuous costs. Now, fast forward, say 3 to 5 years down the road, when the garden is done, maybe it'll be done sooner. But either way, when that space is done, the only thing I'll have to do to maintain, I'll have to, maybe top it off with some mulch and compost every spring, bug spray to keep some of the critters off, and then trimming the hedges. That's not even a cost really. That's a maintenance item, right? So, but then you look at Laura or Monty's gardens, and the cost. Laura, perfect example. Laura right now. Her and her husband are building out that new space, and they have an existing space. Well, they're having to run all sorts of new water lines, electric. They just purchased a Hartley greenhouse, but it's something that is going to add to the garden, and once purchased once, she's never going to have to obviously purchase it again. There's tons and tons of mulch and soil that they've been putting in. Like I said, the water lines. Because she lives in high desert, she has to put in all sorts of water lines. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And Monty, even though he's thrifty, I know, especially early on when he was building out his garden, I know he's still had to lay out. In fact, actually, it's in one of his books. Actually, it's in a couple of his books, I believe. He went to buy some plants at auction, and he had a budget of, let's say, a few $100s, and he wound up spending well over $1,000. And he bought something like 1,000 trees or bushes, and trees and bushes. Either way, he went over his budget. And that, as gardeners, happens a lot of times, I feel. And because I've been watching a lot of people on YouTube and Instagram and the social medias and reading their books, we tend to forget the wallet sometimes, and we overspend what we wanted to. But it's all to build out our gardens. It's all to create something that is unique and interesting and special and brings us joy and maybe joy to others. So what does it take to build a garden? It takes a lot. It takes time, effort, energy, and cost. It takes labor, a lot of labor. So when we go and we look at a garden, whether you're a gardener or not, more often than not, we're awed and we're oohed by the beautiful flowers, the well-designed gardens, the crisply cut hedges. And we often forget that a lot went into bringing that to where it is today. Next time you maybe go to see a garden, or if you see one on television or YouTube, just think, what did it take to build out that garden? That's just something to think about. And I think it's something that makes the garden just a little bit more special. If you haven't subscribed to me, please subscribe so this way you can follow along as I build out my garden here in Eastern North Carolina, and click that bell icon to be notified of when I do post up a new video. Probably do a garden tour maybe end of July this month. Yeah, so maybe a midsummer garden tour, and then we'll do a late summer garden tour. Maybe we'll see how it goes, but click that bell icon to be notified. If you'd like to support the channel and help me build out my garden, check out the Teespring link below, where you can get maybe a snazzy t-shirt, coffee mug, or something along those lines. If you don't follow me on Instagram, please follow me on Instagram. I often post up pictures there that you won't see here on YouTube. Sometimes I do close-up shots of flowers and I'll post that up on Instagram. Interesting stuff. So really, that's all I got about for today. Oh, hopefully this video comes out okay. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. And I think that's about it. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. Okay.